This is Geek Therapy Radio.
What are we waiting for?
And now your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger.
Welcome to this edition of Midweek Geek here on Geek Therapy Radio. I am your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger. I hope you've had a good week since the last time we met up. This episode of Midweek Geek is not going to be an easy one. And I'll just cut to the chase. It's because it's the follow-up to this whole Chris Hardwick, Chloe Dykstra sexual abuse, mental abuse allegations drama, I'll say. I don't want to use the word drama lightly to make light of this, like it's some sort of tabloid whatever, because sexual abuse is not something to be made light of, or just, it's not juicy. It's not supposed to be some juicy tabloid fodder. But that's what this topic of Midweek Geek is going to focus on. Now, let me preface what we're about to get into. Please take what I am saying here with an appropriately sized grain of salt, whether it's a small grain of salt, whether it's a microscopic grain of salt, or whether it's all the salt in the ocean. Take it with a grain of salt, because I still maintain, like I first maintained all those weeks ago about this, that if Chloe Dykstra was telling the truth, then Chris Hardwick deserved all the repercussions for it. However, it doesn't seem so clear that she was telling the truth. Now, again, if she was, that's one thing. That's the grain of salt to take with this, is because if she was telling 100% the truth, if she could have proved it, if she can prove it, chooses to prove it in a court of law, then that's different. All of us making judgments and opinions on this matter, our opinions are moot, our judgments are moot, if she could or chose to prove any of this. Do you hear what I'm saying here? And it's not just to be careful to, pardon my French, protect my own ass. It's, again, because sexual abuse allegations are extremely serious. And I know women in my life who have endured sexual abuse. Some of you listening to this probably know of women in your life or men in your life who've endured the same thing. Some of you listening are the victims of this, and that's why this is so important. So moving the ball forward a little bit here, I was reading an article in GQ, and this was posted a few weeks ago, and I have been sitting on this topic. I've had people in my audience tell me, email me, write to me on Twitter, whatever, that I need to revisit this Chris Hardwick, Chloe Dykstra issue again, because new details have come forward. AMD has conducted its investigation of the issue, and new details have come forward on this, and I needed to revisit it. So I've been waiting, and I read this article in GQ a few weeks ago, and I've been sitting on it, wondering how I want to put it, because you have to be so careful with this. And here's what I've come up with. GQ, in this case, is dangerously naive to the impact that their columnist Scott Meslow has on actual abuse victims. Scott Meslow put out a piece that I will just say is outrageous and self-serving. I will say that whether he knows it or not, belittles and arguably spits in the face of sexual abuse victims and people who have been falsely accused of sexual abuse. I'm not necessarily saying Chris Hardwick. The article basically starts with Scott Meslow saying, quote, "What if AMC and NBC found a mediocre nerd that doesn't have allegations of emotional and sexual abuse leveled against him?" Unquote. Quote, "What if AMC and NBC found a mediocre nerd that doesn't have allegations of emotional and sexual abuse leveled against them?" Unquote. This whole article starts out with an insult, with a personal attack on Chris Hardwick in this case. That tells you that everything that comes after that first headline is bunk, should be taken not with the grain of salt, but is crushed by the weight of the salt itself. Starting an argument with a personal insult against the subject negates that argument, but that's not the point here. We live in the society where we have confused commentary with news. People say, "Oh, my favorite news show, I get my news from Bill Maher, or I get my news from Sean Hannity." That's not news, that's commentary. So this article that Scott Meslow is writing is commentary meant to be inflammatory. It's meant to get you pissed off. It's meant to coerce you towards one way of thinking without an actual basis in truth. Let me remind you, through this whole ordeal, through this Chris Hardwick versus Chloe Dykstra sexual allegation abuse ordeal, no truth or evidence has been brought against Chris Hardwick. There has been no evidence of truth in any of this. At every step of the way, Chloe Dykstra has chosen from the very beginning, in her very first post that made the rounds on the internet, not to name Chris Hardwick specifically. Furthermore, when AMC did their investigations into all of this, Chloe Dykstra refused to participate. In her words, she said, quote, "I could have provided more details, but chose not to. I have said what I wanted to say on the matter, and I wish to move on with my life. For that reason, I chose not to participate in the investigation against the person I spoke of. I do not believe an eye for an eye, and therefore I have only shared evidence with those I felt should see it." Not the police! Not a judge! I have to be careful here. If it looks like a duck, smells like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's probably... I'm careful with my words. You need to infer the rest of that sentence. Perhaps there's a reason why Chloe Dykstra did not name him specifically in her first piece about this. In the initial essay that started all of this. Maybe there's a reason she didn't name him specifically, and maybe there's a reason that she does not want to participate in an investigation. Sorry for the pause here. This isn't going on air. This isn't going to be on the actual radio show, so you'll forgive my pauses here as I try to collect my thoughts and be as rational as possible about this. But let me just say right here in the middle of this, the reason why I'm so passionate about this and the reason why this is so heavy and important to get right is because so far, what it appears like is person A trying to further their career at the expense of person B. Because what would person B have to gain from destroying the career of person A? A low-level celebrity, social media celebrity, accusing a very popular A-lister versus that A-lister going after a D-lister. The A-lister has nothing to gain by going after the D-lister. And I'll just say it. Chris Hardwick has nothing to gain from destroying the career of Chloe Dykstra. Chloe Dykstra has everything to gain from destroying Chris Hardwick's career. And I'm not saying, again, let me reiterate, I'm not saying that she is a liar. Chris Hardwick may have done those things to her. But we need to put this in perspective, and we need to take this seriously. She has not provided evidence legally. She has not participated in an investigation. She has willfully not participated. She was asked to participate, and she didn't. We are at a very important place right now in the Me Too movement. A very important place, sorry I bumped the microphone, where society is realizing now, AMC has made the choice to quote unquote play chicken with these allegations. It's not playing chicken. It's setting a precedent that you can't ruin someone's career over allegations. There needs to be legal proof against them. They asked for it. Chloe Dykstra did not give it to them. And again, didn't even name him in the first essay she wrote. The precedent is being set now that you need to have proof that people's careers are being ruined over allegations, and allegations aren't legal. That we need to keep the quote-unquote the hashtag #MeToo movement pure. You need to keep it pure by providing proof. Do you know why you need to keep it pure? Do you know why this whole thing has got me so fired up? I don't know if you hear in my voice. This is the most fired up I've ever been with anything relating to Geek Therapy Radio. There are people who actually are abused. There are actual victims of sexual and emotional abuse. And when you toss around willy-nilly accusations with no proof, you spit in the faces of those who have actually been abused. So this whole subject, this whole story between Chris Hardwick and Chloe Dykstra is pivotal for the movement, for the Me Too movement. Chloe Dykstra goes on to say that she wishes to focus on mental abuse with institutions like RAINN, RAINN, and other support groups for survivors. So far, what it looks like on the surface with Chloe Dykstra and Chris Hardwick, so far it looks like she was trying to do something to further her career. Dare I say it, naive, maybe unknowingly, probably unknowingly, I'm not going to call her evil, but she didn't know, it appears like she didn't know that she is pissing in the faces of actual abuse victims and possibly even crapping on some of their graves here. Doesn't it seem like if Chris Hardwick actually did these things to her that severely, that for the sake of victims, she would want to bring that evidence forward legally? Doesn't it seem like that? Grain of salt disclaimer. I'm saying it again. Maybe she is telling the truth in all of this. And I know that it's hard for abuse victims to call out their aggressors. I know that. I've heard it from many abuse victims that there's this thing, it's hard to come out against somebody. It's hard to come out against your abuser. I know this. I've heard this. I've seen this. Maybe a lot of you are listening to this and you're waiting for me to get to that point. That we can't throw Chloe Dykstra completely under the bus because, yes, it is a fact that it's hard for victims to come out against their abusers. I know that. But on a stage like this, where there's so much to be gained as far as helping other victims come forward, don't you think that Chloe Dykstra, if she had all this evidence, would have made it all available legally? She says she doesn't she doesn't believe in eye for an eye. Do you believe in helping other people? Do you believe in saving other abuse victims? What about their eyes? What about their hearts? What about their minds? If Chris Hardwick needs to be outed as an actual sexual predator, it would make more victims brave enough to come forward with their own stories with their own evidence. So far, what we see here, grain of salt, is what appears to be crying wolf. And when you cry wolf, do you know what that makes other legit victims do? You can see it on YouTube. I just zip my lips. When people see so many other people apparently crying wolf, it makes them not want to come out with their own story, with their own allegations, with their own evidence. So my takeaway from this, again, is that maybe Chloe Dykstra is telling the truth. And if she is telling the truth and does have evidence, she can help other abuse victims by coming forward with that. So far, she has not. She didn't name him in the first essay. She chose not to participate in AMC's investigation. And now, this writer for GQ is casting doubt on AMC and Chris Hardwick, and AMC for bringing Chris Hardwick back to work because of the allegations against him. Guess what, Scott Meslow? They are allegations. Allegations is not proof. It's not legal. Maybe AMC is setting the precedent that you can't fire people over allegations. They did their due diligence up to and including asking Chloe Dykstra to bring forth the evidence, and she chose not to. So for the sake of keeping Me Too pure, in the evidence of abuse from actual victims pure, they chose to hire or to bring Chris Hardwick back to work. He wasn't fired. He was on a probation, basically, until they figured this out. AMC did their due diligence. No other woman in Chris Hardwick's life has ever even remotely accused him of sexual abuse. And I sympathize with Chloe Dykstra to an extent. And I know if you're watching this on YouTube or somewhere where you can have a comment section, a lot of you are not going to. You are going to set her on fire in the comments. I know it. Chloe Dykstra has self-confessed to suffering from major depression, mental disorders, and anorexia. Mental disorders and depression, mental disorders. Perhaps she doesn't remember their relationship the way it actually went down. Grain of salt. Again, grain of salt. Maybe she remembers it exactly. And she says she has evidence. But she chose not to name him in the essay. She chose not to give that evidence to a judge or police. She chose not to participate in the investigation. Why? So, I don't know exactly how to leave this. I tried to be very careful. And I know at some points in this, it's going to sound like I have severe personal doubts against Chloe Dykstra, and I do have those doubts. I do have personal doubts about her account and her motives and how it affects actual abuse victims, and that her wanting to be involved with RAINN and other support groups for survivors could be infuriatingly self-serving and disingenuous. Could be. Grain of salt, could be. It just begs the question, why would she not bring forth the legal evidence? She could help so many people if she would just bring forth the legal evidence like she has always claimed she has. While I am very skeptical about her accounts, given her self-confessed mental problems and her lack of naming him in the first essay and her reluctance and willful disagreement to participate in any investigation, that I am skeptical. But I go back. If she is telling the truth and she has evidence of this, Chris Hardwick should pay for it. There needs to be purity in the Me Too movement. There needs to be purity in allegations of sexual abuse. So far, other than probably Weinstein and in other cases, this seems to be one of the most high-profile cases in the Me Too movement. Doubly so now because the accuser has actually been able to go back to work. Or the accusee, Chris Hardwick, has been able to go back to work. Where so many others were brought down just on mere allegations. Now, like I mentioned in the previous one, Geek Therapy, where I mentioned this, people like Bill Cosby had dozens, many women bring evidence against him. Many. In Chris Hardwick's case, there was only one human being alive accusing him of anything. One human being alive. And Weinstein has, in the Weinstein case, many women. So many other people who have been accused of sexual misconduct and abuse have many people, women in this case, coming against them with evidence. Many women with evidence, legal evidence. Chloe Dykstra is the only woman alive who's brought any allegations against Chris Hardwick. And has willfully withheld evidence. And then wants to work with nonprofits and charities that help survivors of sexual abuse. It doesn't add up. I don't understand why there's so many people who want to see Chris Hardwick burn based on allegations alone. Why does this writer for GQ Scott Meslow want to see Chris Hardwick burn based on allegations, not evidence? Not legal evidence. You know, I'm going around and around with this, and I think what do you think? Email me, geektherapy@iheartmedia.com. That's geektherapy@iheartmedia.com. Or go on my Facebook page, Geek Therapy Radio. Instagram, Geek Therapy Radio. Twitter, Geek Therapy Radio. Or if you're watching on YouTube, comment below. What do you think about all this? Remember my grain of salt. Everything I said here in the past 20 or so minutes is moot the day that Chloe Dykstra brings out the legal evidence. I am wrong in my skepticism if Chloe Dykstra brings out legal evidence. But all we have now, right now, because of Chloe Dykstra's own decisions, is skepticism. That's probably how we could summarize this whole episode of Midweek Geek, is that all we have right now is, according, in regards to Chloe Dykstra's claims, is skepticism. What does a D-list actor have to gain going after an A-list? Or what does a D-list celebrity have to gain versus going against an A-list, versus what she's saying that an A-list is trying to destroy her D-list career? She has everything to gain. He has everything to lose. He has nothing to lose by going after a D-lister. She says he's trying to destroy her career. It doesn't make sense. This all adds up to skepticism. And you know what's at stake? Actual victims of abuse. I've said my piece. Comment below if you're watching this on YouTube. Let me know what you think with all over my social media, Geek Therapy Radio, all over social media. I'm having a hard time talking now about this. I'm just going to wrap it up. If you're watching on YouTube, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not everything is this deep. I talk about lots of geek things, and Chris Hardwick we operate in the same kind of realm, the same kind of geek sphere. So that's why it's even a discussion on Geek Therapy Radio. That, and I know people in my life who have dealt with sexual abuse. So that's why I take this so seriously. We talk about all sorts of geek things, fun things, airplanes, art, video games, astronomy, all sorts of fun things. So if you consider subscribing on YouTube, that I appreciate it. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, you can find Geek Therapy Radio with Johnny Hemberger all over iTunes and Spreaker and the iHeartRadio app and Google Podcasts, and I'm probably forgetting other stuff. Just search for the Geek Therapy Radio podcast with Johnny Hemberger and we'll come up. That's all I got to say. I really appreciate you guys just hearing me vent on this, basically, is what it probably amounts to. And I really want to know your opinions, what you think. So feel free to get at me in the comments below here on YouTube, all over social media. I've said it. I'll wrap it up now. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in a few days for the actual episode of Geek Therapy Radio, and next week for Midweek Geek. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to me today. And I guess I'll see you guys next time. Take care of each other, starting with yourselves. And I'll see you guys later.